welcome to Crossview Radio, a weekly podcast for Wayne County. I'm John Marino, pastor of Crossview Church in Orrville. We exist to glorify God by exalting Christ and magnifying the gospel for the joy of all nations. We are joined here today by a special guest, someone who I've had a chance to meet here in the Ohio area in the last couple months. And many of you may realize, especially those of you here in Wayne County, that we have a large number of Amish in our community. Particularly, we have a lot more down in Holmes County, but also Wayne County, and really spread out throughout Northeast Ohio. And so in light of that, we're going to talk a little bit about the Amish community, and we're joined today by Joe Keim, who is the executive director and founder at Mission to Amish People. And I recently had the opportunity to meet Joe and to see their facility in Savannah, Ohio. And so just want to say, Joe, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, John. It's a pleasure to be here and be part of the ministry there that you have in Orrville.
Yeah, so grateful for what you guys have done and what you're doing to reach the Amish community. I think in a lot of ways, the Amish community really is ignored in large part by people. We don't know what's going on there, and we're close to them and have a lot of opportunities to interact. But as we get started, Joe, I'd like you maybe just to tell us a little bit about your background and what motivated you to start this ministry.
Okay, well, I was born and raised Amish, Old Order Amish, here in Ashland, Ohio, and then got saved in 1985, which was not something that the church preached, but I learned from an outside source that Christ is the only way. I understood grace for the first time. And it changed my life radically. That was in 1985. And in 1987, I left the Amish with my wife. We had gotten married, and were married for about 9 months, and then left and got involved in a church here in Savannah, just a local church where we have ministered out of for about 30 years now. But in 1999, the Lord just really burdened me to go back to our people. Up until that point, it had been about 15 years since we had left, and I was sort of like Jonah. I was running from them. They had excommunicated us. They shunned us, and we kind of ran. We kind of did our own thing, but. That was in 1999, and by 2001, we had raised enough funds as a missionary family, that we went full-time. And so we have been in this ministry for 18 years now.
Tell us a little bit about primarily what Mission to Amish People does. What is the daily happenings there?
We have a threefold purpose. Number one is evangelizing and discipling Amish people and former Amish. And so much of what we do falls under those two types of ministries. We do send Bible lessons out. There are correspondence Bible lessons that go all over the country. Last year, we sent out over 98,000 Bible lessons. And from that, we received over right around 300 salvation decisions in the mail. And then we do a publication called The Amish Voice that goes out to 8,000 Amish families. And of course, we do a lot of one-on-one discipleship and evangelism. And so number one, evangelism and discipleship. And number two, help those who leave the Amish transition from their old culture to the American or English culture. And of course, the ones that we help the most are the ones that come from a more conservative background, more legalistic backgrounds, and have a hard time transitioning. We help them with various documents and so forth. And then number three, just go to churches and speak. And we've done that to spoken in hundreds of churches since the year 2000.
Tell me a little bit about what's going on. I know, so you guys right there on site, in reference to really your second purpose there is you have, I know, seen you've got classes there and things where maybe Social Security, information and just trying to help them with the basics of life there. But there's something else going on at that location. You guys have just opened or are about to open New Beginnings Homestead. Is that correct?
We are. We have been raising funds for about 3 years now and have reached our goal of $350,000. And the building process is coming pretty close to an end. The flooring is all down, and what New Beginnings Homestead is it's a 3-apartment house, and upstairs and downstairs we are able to take in up to 8 Amish girls who have left, and bring them in and just mentor them and help them with, you mentioned like birth records, Social Security numbers, and driver's license, GEDs. We do GED classes here, and just a number of other things. But that's what New Beginnings will be about. And
then you have actually right there a bulk food store where they can work while they're there. And I think that's what just opened. Is that right?
That opened in March.
Okay.
Just about less than a month ago. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Let's talk a little bit, Joe, about just the Amish way of life, and maybe just briefly share with us, what's the difference between Amish and Mennonite? Why is it that they live such, from our perspective, a sheltered lifestyle? What's going on in their entire way of life there?
Well, the Amish come from the Reformation that took place in Switzerland back in the 1500s. And so over the years, there were a number of splits. Originally, you had the Mennonites, you had the Quakers, and the Hutterites. Those were sort of the 3 major groups that came out of the Anabaptist and Reformation back in Martin Luther's day. And it wasn't until about 1690 that a man named Jacob Ammon was part of the Mennonite church and was not seeing or agreeing with the leadership. And so he split off of the Mennonite church. And this all took place over in Switzerland, Germany area. And he split off. They became known as the Amish people. And it wasn't until 1723 that the first Amish people got on the adventure and sailed across the waters to America. And, of course, the groups have, at one point, there wasn't all that much difference. If you go back to Switzerland, you won't even know the difference between those that are Mennonite and those who are, would not be Mennonite. But over here in America, they have sort of stood their ground, and particularly in the last 50 to 100 years when technology has become more of a reality, and they've been able to, kind of set apart. I mean, one of the things that they trust as far as their salvation goes is to be separate from the world. That separation is all outward appearance, so it's a big deal. They make a big deal of it.
When I engage people in gospel conversations, there are really kind of 2 big veins of thought that I have that I want to come out in the conversation. One of those is surrounded around this word authority, and the other one is the doctrine of salvation. So in other words, I want to know what this person, whoever I'm sharing Christ with, I want to know what they believe is authoritative. Where can they go to find truth? And then I also want to know, secondly, how can they be right with God, or how do they understand that they can be right with God? And so the same thing is true when I look at the Amish community. As I'm engaging them in conversation, and as we as Christians are sharing Christ with them, I want to know those things as I go into the conversation so I can be better equipped. So could you maybe share a little bit, particularly with this first part here, what's authoritative for an Amish person? Where do they go to find truth? Where do they go to find what's right and what's wrong?
Well, there are many different types of Amish, maybe as many as 40. Although they have one thing in common, there's many different types, and they vary from very, very legalistic to open-minded, more spiritual, and preaching the gospel. Mm-hmm. And then you have everything in between. But the one thing that they all have in common is this ordinance letter. Mm-hmm. And this ordinance letter varies in length, of course, in detail. In my home community, I come from an old order Amish church, which when you compare our old order with the old order in Holmes County, we would have been considered the old order. Okay. That's how we actually looked at ourselves. And so our ordinance letter was very detailed when it came to clothing and Bucky style and just everyday life. It was all spelled out on this ordinance letter. It was sort of the standard. It was the go-to. It was, I often say, you could have pulled the Bible out from under the Amish church, and they would not have known that anything happened. But if you ever pulled this ordinance letter out from under the church, it would have crumbled.
Wow. Now, each Amish community has its own ordinance letter. Is that right? Centered around a bishop?
That's right. Yeah, they all have their own ordinance letter, and it varies a little bit. And, you might have this, like, I'll give you an example. We fellowshipped with another old order Amish church. They had the chainsaw. We were not allowed to have the chainsaw. Mm-hmm. And this was a big difference. To most people, having a chainsaw or not having one is not a big deal. But to us, that was the big separation. Yeah. But it wasn't so big that we weren't able to fellowship together, and so we had marriages that went back and forth. And but then at a certain point, though, particularly when you get into like the New Order and the Beachy Amish, then there was no connection of fellowship there. Mm-hmm. We would not have been able to marry into their group. Now, they could have married into our group if they would have became one of us.
So with this whole idea of, the ordinance letter, what's authoritative, what's not authoritative, we had been talking previously a little bit about this, but Matthew 16:19 is a verse that I think sometimes is taken out of context. Obviously, the Roman Catholic Church does this, but also the Amish community as well, where Jesus says to Peter, he says, "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." How does the Amish community take that verse and really kind of distort it almost in their just everyday life, ordinance letter, what's authoritative, all those kinds of things?
Yeah, and so this ordinance letter that is that every church has is made up of many different rules, mm-hmm. and the Amish church has always believed that the church has the power to establish whatever guidelines they feel a need to, and as they establish that guideline or that rule on earth, it is immediately carried out in heaven. Mm-hmm. And so when the outside law clashes with one of their law always wins, mm-hmm. even if it means going to prison. Mm-hmm. And this has happened a few times where Amish people have literally, first of all, they've refused to pay the fine, and then they end up in jail over like something as simple as a triangle on a buggy, a slow-moving vehicle sign. Yeah.
So they're taking this verse in Matthew, and that's really giving them kind of the credibility they need, essentially, to say the church now is authoritative. The church says what's right and wrong, and really, in my mind, removes the doctrine of this idea of Scripture alone is authoritative for the Christian, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And that also, and this goes back to another thing that we've talked about in the past as well, but different Amish communities with different rules and regulations, there's almost a cultural relativism, I think, that comes out in these communities. This is, correct me kind of here a little bit in my thinking, but the conversation that we had was something along the lines of, well, if you point out to one Amish community, well, this is wrong or whatever, or look at what your community did in the past, they would just dismiss that and say, well, that's what God had for them at that time with that ordinance letter, and this is what God has with us at this time with this ordinance letter. And there's really this relativism that's really permeated their culture, where they're not even wanting to be held accountable to anything outside of their ordinance letter. Is that true as well?
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I mean, in our Amish community, I recently heard a message given by Joseph Graper, and he's done a lot to help the former Amish understand the importance of the ground at the cross is level. But when we came out of say our little community, and we kind of lived on this hill, and this was our community. And if you really wanted to be right with God, you had to live on our hill. We were the closest of any Amish community in the world. Now, Joseph explains how that his father, when he was a young boy, moved from one community to another. And there was just a little bit of difference. In this other community, they were allowed to have the bicycles, which they were not allowed to before. And this immediately created another hill. And now suddenly this hill became the standard. And everybody, all the other little communities around them were just a little bit off, And that's the mindset that these Amish communities have.
Yeah. This, the next thing that I want to talk about here a little bit is, and I think in some ways is difficult to answer because of how much diversity exists within the Amish community regarding their theology. But with regard to the doctrine of salvation, could you give maybe just a brief overview? We talked about authority a little bit. Can you give a brief overview of their view of salvation, how they can be right with God?
Well, the first thing, I think of, when I'm asked that question, I think of the person that is laying in the coffin, and he is sat down in the midst of the congregation, and they are having their last service. And these are some of the things that will come out in that service. We believe this man or this woman is most likely with God because they were in right standing with the church. So that is number one. Now, what does right standing with the church look like? Well, first of all, separated from the world. Second of all, baptized into the Amish church and following the ordinance letter. And parental obedience is a big one. So these are all things. If this person did it just right and they were still dressed in their Amish clothes at the time they passed away, then there's a very good chance that this person is in heaven.
And so it's very much a works-based form of salvation. In fact, the way you said it there's a good chance. In other words, there's still some doubt there, even in that. And do they understand the idea of, salvation by faith alone, grace alone, Christ alone? Is that an understanding in the community or no?
The community that I came from, and I'm going to say the majority, some would disagree with me, but I have been to enough communities that I can say this with confidence. The majority of the Amish communities in the United States do not understand salvation by grace alone and faith alone. But there are some that do. And so I cannot put them all in that, category.
Sure.
But our mindset, I tell you, John, our mindset was, we realized we were not perfect. Only God is perfect. And we realized that we weren't. And so we were taught that we would do the best that we could. And hopefully we could reach at least 80% perfection. But whatever it was that we couldn't reach, that's where Jesus would fill in and finish that part we couldn't reach 100% of.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because that, as we know, goes against even Philippians chapter 3 and verse 9, where Paul clearly says, that he has a righteousness not his own, that it's entirely the righteousness of Christ. And, whereas you're saying with the Amish community, it's like, we'll get, partway there, and then whatever we can't make, in our own self-effort, Jesus can make up the difference for that, which is obviously totally in contradiction to what Scripture teaches. So I think that's one thing we ought to keep in mind as we engage those in the Amish community, is just understanding that, and like you said, not 100%, but most of the time, this idea of work salvation, bringing them back to what the gospel is. Let me ask this question, and maybe kind of transition a little bit here from the doctrine and theology to just practical ways to engage the Amish community. What are some ways, we are in Wayne County here in Orville. I know I've got an Amish buggy that goes by my house probably once every month or two. We'll see one go by. And we're down in Holmes County a lot. But can you just share a little bit? How can we maybe increase our contact with the Amish community, and how can we build redemptive relationships? How can we break social boundaries? What do we bring up in conversation? Maybe that's, a lot of questions, but how can we begin to build relationships with this community?
There are 3 ways to connect with your Amish community. The first one is through the Postal Service. The second one is simply face-to-face. And the third one is through former Amish. So those are 3 different ways that we reach into the Amish community. And I guess I would like to start with the first one, Postal Service. As far as I'm concerned, and if you think about it, the Amish, nowadays, so many of them have cell phones, smartphones, actually. Yeah. And you can't really say they're completely cut off from the outside world, because the phone is really bringing the Amish community to their knees in a lot of different areas. But still, you wouldn't walk into an Amish home normally and see internet or TV or radio or any outside connection. And so when we went into the ministry back in 2000, I said, we have to learn how to use the mailbox. And as we have learned to, different publications, Bible studies, and I've heard people sending out Bibles, sermons, and books and literature and whatever, that they have a database of addresses that they will send to. And when that Amish person gets that piece of literature, they have the opportunity to sit down before they go to bed at night and, pull it up, read it. And that is how we are reaching a lot of Amish people right now. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the best way, because they don't feel targeted, I guess would be a good word. If you walk to their house and you don't have much of a relationship and you begin to share the gospel with them, they're going to immediately put their guard up.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not around and they have your piece of literature, they're going to feel less threatened.
Yeah, we have a number of addresses even in our own community, and this is something that we hope to do a little bit later this year, but we just want to try to send a Bible to hopefully every address on that list in our community of Orville at least, and be able to reach out to them that way, and hopefully that will generate some redemptive relationships as well. So you mentioned a couple others as well, face-to-face and former Amish.
Yeah, face-to-face. One of probably the best way that you can really spend time with an Amish person, get to know them, and gain their trust is by providing taxi service.
Okay.
Many of the Amish really depend on their neighbors and English friends to come around and pick them up and take them somewhere. And so you're sitting there in the car, you're going somewhere, and that's the time to establish a connection. And I will say this, I think this is the right time to share this. When you are sitting in that car and you have time together, be careful not to preach to them, but ask questions, because and maybe this will come later on in the interview, but asking questions will get you a whole lot further than beginning to preach what you believe. And I always say just be friendly, just be yourself, be authentic, and don't worry about the questions. You're just take this the right way, but I'm just a dumb Englishman, and I don't know what you believe as Amish people. Can you just tell me what you believe?
Yeah.
And just act dumb, and they'll sit there and they'll tell you. They'll want to tell you.
And I think that's a good exercise in humility for us too, because as we've already alluded to here, you can't necessarily say 100% of Amish people believe in X, Y, and Z. And so asking them those kinds of questions about what do you believe gives an opportunity for you to say, okay, well, maybe this individual is not quite in, the mold of what the majority of them are or whatnot. And so that gives an opportunity. In fact, I think that's a great way in sharing the gospel with anyone, is to ask a lot of questions to find out what they believe. And then you could take Scripture and say, okay, this is where the Bible addresses this and this and this. And of course, that assumes that we know our own Bibles as well as we engage in conversation.
Yeah, maybe I could just throw this one in too. Just utilize Amish businesses.
Yes.
They sell all kinds of furniture and pie and eggs and noodles and I mean, produce, and the list goes on and on. I mean, particularly down there in your area, I mean, it's a great way to get in there and buy from them and get to know them.
Anything you mentioned as well on that third one, former Amish, any particular insight on that?
Yeah, bordering every Amish community are the former Amish, and you can develop relationships with them. They're already outside the box. They're thinking outside the box. And so get to know them. I mean, I'll tell you, they come with their own needs, and I some of them, many of them tend to flock around others who have left the Amish because they can kind of relate with one another. But I will tell you, the ones that get connected with a non-Amish church or a non-Amish person will go a lot further, a lot faster than someone who will hang around their own former Amish. And so I encourage English people who don't have an Amish background to get connected with them and mentor them, disciple them. And I'll tell you, the more you get to know them and the more they get to know the Bible, the more they want you to go to their families, and they become the doorway into to their families and their community.
I want to ask you a question here, and I know I think I've asked you this question 100 times in 100 different ways because, one of the things that I try to do is, I want to study about, their theology and understand who they are and what they think and why they do this and why they do that. And one of the things that I've just feel like I'm coming up with is I'm coming up empty-handed on just written resources that they would consider to be, primary source documents, things that they would say, yeah, this is what we believe. I don't know of any, and maybe you know some, but I don't know of any, Amish theologians. I don't know of an Amish systematic theology. I don't know of, resources like that just very clearly articulate, this is what the Amish believe. So in light of that, understanding that there's not much available out there, what is available out there that's being written about the Amish? And maybe you could start with just, is there anything primary source document type things? And then as well, I know you guys, Mission Amish People, have some written resources as well, but can you just share some things that are available?
Yeah, I that question was asked by a man in Australia, of all places, about 3 years ago, and from that resulted a book where 8 of us authors wrote a doctrine of the Bible, and we called the book "What Do the Amish Believe?" So we have that book available. But here's the thing, and it's the wrong title. It should be renamed to "Do the Amish Still Believe What Their Forefathers Believed?" Okay. And what we did is we took the 18 Articles of Faith, also known as the Dordrecht Confession. This was put together by the forefathers way back in Switzerland. And to this day, the Amish churches will take the Dordrecht Confession and they will go through one at a time until they've covered all 18 with those who are preparing for baptism. Now, here's the problem. I don't remember a thing that was taught. First of all, it was in a language that we did not understand, or it was the least understood of 3 languages, and it was written in German. And these men, these preachers, would sit in a circle, and us younger ones, 17-year-olds, we would sit there, and they would go over one at a time and try to explain what this meant, what each one of these Dordrecht Confession statements meant. But again, the problem was we didn't understand it. And the second problem, and this was the worst one, they don't follow those. Yeah. It's just tradition to go through them, because you could chuck those, you could throw them right out the window and still keep going, because again, what really came out during those times of sitting around in a circle was the ordinance letter. So there is a standard, and it is the Dordrecht Confession, but the problem is they don't follow the truth behind the Dordrecht Confession.
Sure. So then it ends up being primarily just, from generation to generation, more of a verbal carrying that tradition on. Is that right?
It really does. Yeah. Yes. It's hard to understand how that can happen, but that's exactly what's happening.
Are there other resources, maybe not primary resources, but things? I know you mentioned the book that you guys worked on. Anything else that's available where we can learn more about Amish beliefs?
We do Amish awareness conferences. I'm getting ready to do one here in 2 weeks, of all places, in Wyoming. And but we have this book, Amish, Our Friends, But Are They Believers? And what we've done is we started out with the Anabaptist movement, because really there's so much good, rich history there. And so we do a whole session on just the Anabaptist movement. But then we go into the culture, which, again, is so rich among the Amish, and so many great values that we can learn from the outside. And then we go into what the Amish believe, what legalism does, and then how to reach the Amish people with the gospel. So that is a great resource. We sell this book for $12. it can be, people can get it online at mapministry.org.
Okay.
And yeah.
Yeah, and that was what I was going to ask you. If there are any other questions, or if people want to check it out more, your website, mapministries.org, is where they can go for that. So
Yes.
Great. Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining us today and for talking a little bit about ministering to the Amish. Again, as I alluded to at the beginning, I think this is an area where really we have neglected, because it just seems like we never make contact with the Amish. We don't know what they believe, why they believe, what they're doing, why they're doing it. And so I think that this is really an untapped area in our own a mission field in our own country that we have an opportunity to engage. So thank you again, Joe, for what you guys are doing and for talking with us today.
Yeah, thank you, John. I appreciate it very much.
Yep. Thanks for listening to Crossview Radio. I'm John Marino, pastor of Crossview Church in Orville. We meet Sundays at 10 a.m. at the Orville YMCA. To find out more about Crossview Church, visit us online at crossvieworville.com.